That's right. Back at it again, Full Custom Hot Dog here, doing another Blu-ray review. That's right. And today we're going to be talking about the 1987 film, American Gothic, directed by John Hough or Hough. I don't know. He's directed quite a few other things, though, most notably Howling 4, which I believe most people say is where the Howling series starts to go downhill, but also directed the fantastic film, The Watcher in the Woods, one of a very small selection of Disney films that is utter nightmare fuel and completely bonkers. If you haven't seen it, I don't know, maybe it's on Disney+. Fantastic movie. We're going to be talking about the release that came out via Scream Factory. I feel like it was somewhat recently, but I could be wrong. I want to say a couple years ago, but what do I know? I could be wrong. So, what is on this disc? Well, you get an interview with composer Alan Parker, who does a pretty solid job here. I did like the interview because he's a fairly accomplished musician. I tend to be surprised by a lot of the people that do soundtracks for horror films because I always think they're, I don't know. I don't mean to shame their soundtracks, and especially the stuff I watch, the hot garbage, but sometimes, oftentimes even, they have some pretty damn good credentials, and they're kind of working on these just goofball, dumb movies. So I would just think they're just grabbing any dude off the street, you know? But, like I mentioned, he does have pretty good credentials. He's played with Frank Sinatra, Stevie Wonder, even some of the Beatles and David Bowie. That's insane that someone worked on this movie that has talked to any of those people or seen them on purpose, you know, consensually. But so there's that. We've got an interview with Alan Parker, and again, pretty good. And the trailer. That's it. Pretty boring release. Not worth too much. I picked this up at the Target buy two, get one free. And that's how I'd recommend picking it up. If you like the movie, which I did, I'd probably pick this up at a $10, maybe $12 price point. 15's pushing it, though. That's a hard no from me. But I did enjoy this movie. So, as a release, what score do we give it? I'm going to give it a C-. Because the film doesn't look bad. You got a trailer, you've got an interview with the composer, which is cool, but you don't really have much from anyone else. And there's quite a few people on this film. Of course, quite a few passed away because there's an older couple here that are in the film, and they're older. They're not alive anymore. That's just that's how it works. But what is this film about? Well, according to IMDb, a group of travelers make emergency landing on an island in the Pacific Northwest after their seaplane malfunctioned and stumbled across an isolated and psychopathic family. So this film reminds me a lot of two films that I very much love. Maybe you do too. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Obviously, we've got a family in the middle of nowhere, and they're buck wild crazy. They're not cannibals, however. There's also a little bit of Silent Night, Deadly Night in here as well, because the family are killing because they're basically Amish and everything else is a sin. I don't know. Some very devout people. You've got a pretty decent cast, save for the lead, played by Sarah Torgoff, who I'm not too familiar with in many things, but it does say she was in Meatballs. She's pretty good and delivers very well. You've got two, as far as I understand, and I'm not too familiar with their careers because I don't watch a lot of older movies, but Rod Steiger playing Pa, who was in things like In the Heat of the Night and On the Waterfront, just some straight classics. And then Ma, played by Yvonne DiCarlo, who was in The Ten Commandments, was Lily Munster. So you just have these two legends spearheading this thing. You also have one of my favorite character actors, Michael J. Pollard, who is always awesome. If you don't know who that is, in Scrooged, he's the guy that freezes. If you haven't seen Scrooged, easily one of the greatest Christmas horror movies of all time. People don't bill it as a horror comedy, and they really should, because there are parts in that film that are more terrifying than half the things I've seen in horror movies. So, watch that. Add that to your list if you haven't. Fantastic. All around, I hated nice chunks of the cast, mainly the teens. I didn't like the teens in this one. In fact, when I started this movie up, I expected to hate it about 20, 30 minutes in. I was like, oh man, this is just going to be a straight up slasher. This is going to suck. Because I thought they were so bad. The film opens up with our lead, Cynthia, who's undergone a traumatic event. I won't say too much there because it's actually pretty gnarly. Surprised they put something like that in there. But her boyfriend there thinks that maybe a vacation will do right. Talks about it with her therapist. And they get some friends together and they're going to go on a little vacation. They stumble on this island and they find a house, a cabin, uninhabited. And that's kind of the silly part here is because while the cabin's inhabited, Ma and Pa come home. That's how they're referred to as the movie. The couple played by Rod Steiger and Yvonne DiCarlo. And suddenly their children start to come out of the woodwork. Fanny, Woody, and Teddy, who are all just developmentally disabled. They all act like children because they've just lived on this island with their two parents. There's hints at inbreeding, I believe, because standard practices in horror would say that all of them are products of inbreeding and potentially a long line of inbreds, a long, proud line of inbreds, and that's what led them to this point. That's what I think, though. I don't think they say whether Ma and Pa are actually bro and sis, but it wouldn't be surprising. And what makes this stand out, and where I started to like this movie, is in a few places. It doesn't end when you think it's going to end. And there's a surprising heel turn, which isn't something you see a lot in film. And what I mean is somebody gets a case of Stockholm Syndrome, and shit gets kind of wacky. And I like that a lot. If you don't know what Stockholm Syndrome is, it's somebody switches teams and becomes a not-so-good guy. And I like that a lot. Something you don't normally see, I don't think. If you can actually name me some films where that happens, let me know. I'd be curious. Because I couldn't think of any off the top of my head. Also, the makeup effects are great. There's a really gross baby scene in this movie. And I'm not going to spoil it. But it almost made me want to dry heave. And I'm not joking. It was really, really gross. And even thinking about it right now, makes me feel a little yucky. Because it looked like... I'll talk about it. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Gross. So that was incredibly effective. And then you get this buck wild heel turn thing that I was talking about. And this movie goes from shitty, boring, generic slasher to something that's a little bit more unique that I could find myself rewatching. And I would say giving it a light recommend. I did dig this movie, especially by the end. It just gets crazy and some genuine gross stuff. And what else could you ask for from a solid horror movie, right? You want either something gross, something cool, something fun. This provides a lot of those. The kills aren't anything too crazy. They're solid enough. Nothing really to write home about, but there's enough in this film that really kept me engaged. I was surprised. And I had always wanted to see this movie. Being a kid in the video store back in the days of VHS, you would just walk down these aisles and there's just rows and rows of the craziest covers you've ever seen. And that's all these older horror movies. That's why the covers were so crazy back then too. They wanted you to grab them and they wanted you to watch these movies based on the cover. The cover had to sell you. That's why some of them still stick out in my head to this day. And I've been trying to buy any of the ones I can remember. I think I probably have them by now, but this is definitely one of them that I could remember always looking at and wondering, what is this movie about? A little disappointed that it takes place on some random island in the Pacific Northwest. I always thought it would be a farm because Pa's got a pitchfork. I was going to call him Homeboy, but that would be disrespectful to Pa. He's got a pitchfork on the cover, and it just seemed like it would be a little bit more Little House on the Prairie meets Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But I like this film a lot, and I'm glad it didn't completely suck. So, I am your host, Full Custom Hot Dog. You could follow me on Twitter. It's Full Custom Hot Dog without the last "oh," because that is just too long for Twitter. So, thank you all for watching, and until next time. If you like what you see,
I love what I see.
Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you can watch whatever comes next. And if you like the music you hear, you can follow me on SoundCloud and Spotify. Check the description for links.